You are watching a Healing Element Podcast special. Show your support by subscribing to the Healing Element Podcast YouTube channel. Also, follow us on Instagram at the Healing Element Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Healing Element Podcast. I am your host, Kaya Marie. Today's topic is the seeds of whiteness and the birth of Black oppression. I am so excited for my guest today, the Reverend Philippe Shock Matthews. Welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. I feel so special.
Because you are.
Got an intro and everything. I was like, oh my goodness. I was a little nervous. You know, I was like in the green room. Wow, okay. Gotta do my hair and everything for this, you know. So I'm ready, you know.
You're ready.
Mm-hmm. You know, girl, I got my hair did. You know, I got it done. So
just for the podcast.
Just for Kai Torrance, only for the Healing Element podcast. Anybody else, I don't give a damn how I look, you know.
Well, this, as you can already tell, this is going to be a great interview, a great episode. So if you are joining us right now, please make sure you subscribe to the Healing Element Podcast channel, and also make sure you give this video a thumbs up and share. Today, we're going to be talking about the creation of whiteness in America. The Reverend Shock Matthews is going to break that down for us so that we have an understanding. The reason why it's important with everything that's going on right now in our country, it's important to understand how we arrived to this point right now. So understanding what whiteness is and why it was created, that's going to be important for us to understand that. In addition, we're going to find out how the creation of whiteness impacted Black men and Black women. And only in order for us to move forward, begin to heal as individuals, as family, as a community, it's important that we understand this. This is how we can start to build stable families, and just really, I guess the most important thing is just heal as individuals. So we're going to be going through that. But first, the man who needs no introduction, we're going to give him an introduction. So the Reverend Philippe Shock Matthews, also known as the Metaphysical Morpheus, is a peak performance minister and the Black trauma scholar of metaphysical science and philosophy. He is a member of the International Metaphysical Ministry and founding minister of First Frequency of Oneness, Science, Manifestation, and Prosperity. The acronym for SHOCK stands for Seeking Higher Omnipotent, Conscious, and Cosmic Knowledge. Affectionately named by the community as the Metaphysical Morpheus, he has developed a unique scientific approach to shocking African and African American people out of the epigenetic trauma that is unconsciously embedded in our bodies due to the impact of whiteness and the creation of our false racial identities and constructs. Reverend Shock says nothing is wrong with Black people, something happened to Black people. We are not sick people. We are sick from being captured, corralled, and controlled by sick people. We must reveal our original first frequency signal. The Metaphysical Morpheus is also a social media influencer, internet marketing entrepreneur, and has been an internet wealth expert since 1998, and exclusively teaches melanated communities how to create wealth using their cell phones, using the science of affiliate marketing at walkawaywealthsystems.com. Best known internationally as the host of the Philippe Matthews Show podcast, which airs live on 8 social media platforms simultaneously. The Philippe Matthews Show is dedicated to featuring content on the subjects of disruptive economics, digital wealth creation, critical race theory, social justice, racism, anti-racism, historical and intergenerational trauma, African American mental illness, genetic memory, epigenetics, comedic science, metaphysics, racial socialization, and healing racialized poverty. The Philippe Matthews Show YouTube channel has over 6 million views and 46,000 dedicated subscribers. He is the founder of the Shock Metaphysics Virtual Comedic Wisdom School and has written over 19 Amazon books. Woo!
I don't know where he's at. Let me go find him right quick. Hold a second, everybody. I'm gonna go find this dude because that's a bad MF right there. Hold on a second. Where he at? Okay. Where? What? Oh my goodness!
Woo! So
my
you know
Lord.
the
When
heat
you
is
said all
going to
of
be
that, I was
brought
like, now
today.
who is this dude? Where is he at? I need to have him on my show. Oh my
You
goodness!
to bring him on your.
Yeah, like I need to clone that dude or something. That brother's been busy doing some stuff. Oh my
Very
goodness.
busy doing great work in our community. And I have to share with everyone, I've been watching Rev Shock's work for a number of years now. So it is truly an honor and a privilege to have him on my platform. I'm still kind of like, well, this is happening. So I'm really excited about that. Just when you watch someone for so long, and he introduced a lot of thought leaders in our community to me that have definitely changed my life, my world outlook. So for that, I am grateful, and I'm happy to have our conversation today. So welcome again to the program.
I am so honored to be here with you, Kai. I love the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to jump right in. And first, we want to talk again. I kind of alluded to it in the opening about why it's important to understand whiteness and why it was created. Why do you think it's a critical time for us right now to start to have this conversation or continue this conversation?
Well, in order to heal our trauma, and a lot of times we're kind of running on a treadmill to stand still, and we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, and nothing's changing. And it's because I'm a metaphysician, so I'm about cause and effect, but I'm also into comedic science, which means I'm into Sankofa, which I have to go back to come forward, which is the same principles that metaphysics is based on. But metaphysics actually is ancient African sacred science. And so that African sacred science says you must find the first cause. Why did this happen? What is the reason behind the reason? The beginning before the beginning began, as Baba Kaba eloquently talks about in his work, Spirituality Before Religion. So what I was excited to do was to find out about what happened to us. I understand now trauma, but there's a lot of histories that we don't have a clear understanding about. Most of the Kemetic community, knows about the Ice Age theory that was made very famous by Dr. Shenkat Tajep, civilization and barbarism. We understand that, where the European came from, the ice and all of that. But we really don't know what happened when they landed here, other than the story and the narrative of killing off the Native Americans, which were Africans first. That's a whole nother history and science that we don't know about. But that psychopathy of coming from the Dark Ages, that trauma coming from the Dark Ages, coming to this land, what created white people? How were they invented? Because there is no history book where a European or any level of scholarship referred to themselves as being white. So when I met Dr. Jacqueline Badalore, probably about now 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe. I mean, it was, it's been a minute. I was doing an interview with someone else, and there was a blog, and I saw her name. I saw the topic and what she said, and I said, let me call her up, which I did. And then she had this book, Birth of a White Nation. And then she started unpacking this amazing hidden history, if you will, of America, that white people were invented, but not just invented, but the reason why they were invented. Now, coming with my own metaphysical knowledge, I've been in metaphysics since I was 10 years old. So I'm 55 now. So yeah, I'm old as hell. So anyway, so after coming from that and with the Kemetic science, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can really now have a true causal effect process and really be able to educate the community. When I say nothing is wrong with us, something happened to us, this is what happened to us.
Wow. And so I think it's so important that you're able to package that all together, because not only can we understand legally what was going on, but we can also understand spiritually what happened to us when whiteness was created. So take us back to when that whole concept was created, kind of what was going on in history at that point in time?
Sure. So between 1664 and 1681, so in the 1600s, this concept where Europeans were being challenged, but not to the degree that they really had to institute the laws, but it was something that was going on where they were looking and seeing what was happening, and they weren't the elite. The 1% really wasn't liking what they were seeing. You know, there were things like they were running out of women to date, court, and mate with the planters, and so they would literally ship British women literally off the ships from England over here to be with these planters. The issue was they were slaves and indentured servants, but the issue is that they got off the boat and they caught jungle fever, many of them, because they had never seen African men before. And so it was legal to marry. It was not illegal to marry outside of your ethnic group, if you will. And so the planters, that was one of the things that was going on. There was some deep-seated hate. You know, this is just my from looking at the history and reading the history and just knowing how European men think and feel, and some of the envy and jealousy that they have for African men and what they did to us in enslavement, and why they were so fascinated by our genitalia and you know, from chopping it off to doing all kind of things with it. This was one of the things that I think was one of the catalysts for these, what we call anti-miscegenation laws that were noodling and coming out. But it wasn't until Bacon's Rebellion occurred, where by Nathaniel Bacon got a group of everyone, indentured servants, slaves, everyone together, like kind of what's happening right now, where the community came together and said, the 1%, we don't have a way out. We have no upwardly mobile way to move ourselves forward as a people, Now, granted, you know, still was, you know, to kill all the Indians. Everybody was messed up, but nobody had economic access other than the 1%. So Nathaniel Bacon created this rebellion that went on, I think, for 2.5 years. America almost didn't happen, but it was a strategy session that they came up with that Dr. Badalore refers to as a divide and conquer strategy, whereby they said, look, we have to do something so that there will never, ever, ever be a threat. Even if there's an uprising, there'll never be a threat to our wealth and our security. And so they created this divide and conquer strategy where they invented this new false racial construct called white people. And so that was 1681. And there were no, there was no Facebook, anything for that stuff to spread. There was no TikTok. We were joking in the green room. And so they had to use, and there was no law enforcement. You know, there's no DOJ or anything like that, Department of Defense and all that stuff. So they had to use the Christian church to spread this message of anti-miscegenation. And in those laws, and let me read to you what anti-miscegenation means, because that's a big word. So there's miscegenation and anti-miscegenation. There are laws that enforce racial segregation at the level of marriage and intimate relationships by criminalizing interracial marriage and sometimes also sex between members of different races. So that's the technical term of anti-miscegenation or miscegenation. And so this invention of white people, it had to be spread, and it had to be propagated throughout the colonies. And so it was the church that did this. So this is why Christianity is one, not just but it's one of the many reasons why when you learn the history and know your history, you kind of look at the whole Christian thing, and when you see Black Christians, if you will, and say, what? It's really insane to me. But that's why I became a minister, so I can be able to tell the truth and show the truth for what it is, regardless of the consequences. Now, as a result of these anti-miscegenation laws, there was a cluster of laws that came out of that. But there were 3 laws that I have memorized from all the interviews I've had with Dr. Jacqueline Banalora. And the first one is that a person of African descent could not vote or run for office. So at that point, you could not participate in the growing of this concept called America. Number 2, a person of African descent could no longer own guns or gunpowder. So as you begin to hear this now, you can see that not only did they create and throw Africans at the bottom or the third level, the lowest level of class and humanity, but you can also see in these laws that the European male was deeply, deeply resentful and envious of the African king, the African man, even though he was an indentured servant or a slave. And this is fascinating because at one point, everybody was, somewhat quote unquote equal, even though there were such a thing as slaves and indentured servants. It wasn't chattel slavery. It was different. But nonetheless, you begin to see that if you take away the right to have guns and gunpowder, well, now I am defenseless. I can't defend my family. I can't defend myself, and I can't eat. Right? No microwaves. No Costco. No Amazon. I'm serious. This was really, really a big deal. So now the African man is becoming defenseless. Now, the last law, the third one was a person of African descent could not take any type of legal action or sue this new designation called white people, this false racial construct. So now I can't defend myself because I'm not allowed to have a gun. And I can't take any legal action against you because the courts are automatically, because I'm because I'm African or because I'm Black, I don't have any rights. Do we see the intergenerational epigenetic history of that playing out today? Yes, we do. But it went deeper than that in terms of the psychosis that built up. Now, mind you, these anti-miscegenation laws, when we talk about 1681, this was 100 years before the U.S. Constitution was written. So Jefferson and the forefathers and all weren't even thought about. They were tickle in the testicles. They weren't even a tickle in the testicles. They did not exist. And so this is why there's this genetic outcry for whites, if you will, and whiteness to survive by any means necessary. This is what is having them to climb up the state capitol walls.
Yeah, that's so deep and so layered. And when you were talking about the creation of whiteness and talking about the 1% and its connection to making sure that they have control over resources and making sure that it stays within a certain group, it also makes me think of Dr. Frances Cress Welson's work, where she also talked about the genetic part of it. Would you mind talking about that part too, a little bit about her theory and how that played in as well?
Absolutely, I'd love to. So, Nana, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in the ISIS papers, the keys to the color. When you look at her work, she hipped us to a term called genetic annihilation. So there's a lot at play when we use that term and unpack that term, genetic annihilation, because the African male is the dominant species on the planet, what I call first frequency, as well as the Black female is the dominant species, but it's the Black male sperm that when it impregnates any other ethnic stock, it becomes African. that is a threat to whatever, wherever that seed is being planted, that is going to be problematic. So literally, that's why the species of this European, quote unquote, white person or people could become extinct. Now, there are other factors in genetic annihilation that are also contributing, but from Dr. Cress Welsing's perspective, as a psychiatrist, and it's really about when the African male seeds a European female, that child comes out African. And if that a child goes with another African, when she becomes of age, if she's a she, all of a sudden you don't even have a memory or a history of who the mother was. So it's the same thing. So this is very, very frightening to this species. Now, if I can go even further back, then let's just play around a little bit with the shake out the joke northern cradle theory, so southern and northern cradle understanding, that when the African went into the Caucasus Mountains, and over 100,300 years, based upon whatever the latest numbers are on Wikipedia, if you will, but somewhere within 100,000 years, which is about 44,000 generations of being born and living in an ice age, it changed the African in order for it to survive in the environment. It altered every aspect of the African in order to adapt to the environment. This adaptation to the environment is what's called axiology. Dr. Edwin Nichols teaches us about this understanding of axiology. And axiology, there's different levels of philosophy and what have you, but from his point of view, it's how the environment shapes the human values, right? Which he calls, the African is person to person, but the European is person to the object. Well, what does that really mean if you're hearing this for the first time? Well, imagine now I'm from Chicago. I was there for 40 years. So I know some of my brethren right there now, it's zero or below zero because it's wintertime. And however, in the summer, we can get up to 90 degrees or even sometimes 100. But I'm now here in sunny California, and it's, I shouldn't even talk about the temperature of how nice it is right now. But it's a completely different climate, and it doesn't snow. So I remember stories literally that I can look at and say how my behavior was different when I was in Chicago versus when I came to California. So I'll give you an example. So when my goddess and I were dating, she came over, she flew in one time. It was February, around this time, as a matter of fact. It was around Valentine's Day. And it was 40 below zero. And a wind chill factor, I think, of 60. It was crazy. It was, the newscaster came on and said, if you walk from your house to your car, whatever skin is exposed will instantly freeze. That's how cold it got. So when you're in 40 below, 60 below temperatures, you're not kind of standing out on a street corner, hanging out, talking shit. You're just not. You're not hanging out with your friends. You're not happy, is what I'm trying to say. You're not a happy camper, and you're not loving nature and loving life. You are cold as H. Now, imagine being birthed into that, and that's the temperature every day. Think about that. No sun, snow, cold every day. Now, let's take it and make it a little worse, because that's what happened. At certain parts of the ice age, it was 200 to 400 below zero. That's death. That's death. And if you're being born into this intergenerationally and having children and families and what have you, generations, that axiology of how the environment is shaping your values makes it such that if you only had 3 months to grow a crop, you are about the resources. It's about me, control, control, control. Otherwise, I die. My family dies. So so that's kind of where that whole 1% person to the object axiological understanding came from. And it's just about being in the environment. When I'm in a cold environment, I act differently. We all do, versus when we're in a sunny environment. The difference is that we've never contemplated what would happen if we were in an ice age and it never went away. What would happen if the ice came from the bottom up, not from the top down, where the ground froze over a period of time? And what would you do with life? Now, let me ask you this, Kai. If you lived in the ice, would you, and you were generationally, and let's say you're, like I said, it was 44,000 generations. So let's say, you're the 30,000th generation, a child of the ice. What do you think your idea of the creator or the cosmos or God would possibly be?
Yeah, I was thinking that while you were talking, and I would probably I'm at war with whatever it is that has kind of allowed this to be my existence, or created a world in which that was my existence.
So you heard the term, or they've used the term of war. We're at war with nature. That's what they say. They're looking at the virus right now as a war against nature. So what happens when your concept of God is always trying to kill you, and has successfully killed your offspring, whereby there have been stories that happened perhaps in your family or within that community where they had to eat the children because the crops didn't make it, or they had to eat their elderly because the crops didn't make it. That's where the whole concept, the literal concept of Dracula comes from. That's a very real concept. That's not a fantasy movie. It's an actual dude named Dracula. So when we understand that, drinking of the blood and all of this stuff, this is what they had to do to survive and stay warm. Think about what happened. So now when we look at this concept of the ice, are we evolving or are we devolving? I say that we are devolving and we're descending into madness, because of what that ice and the cold and the survival mechanism of that is. You and I, we might come from a cold environment, but we know and hope that at one point there's going to be a season shift. There was no hope for a season shift. That was just the way of life. And it was brutal. And so that caused them to have a shrinkage of their pineal gland, the access to higher thought, higher way of thinking, to God, to the creator, to Amma. So when the ice melted and they came out of the ice, they were barbaric. Doesn't that mean civilization? Barbarism. We had civilization. We had everything. We were building pyramids, hanging out on the Nile, smoking some good ganja like we normally do, like we're doing right now. So we had mastered all the sciences and everything. We saw these pale, starving, barbaric individuals who didn't have language, didn't have spirit, didn't have, and we helped them because we're person to person, people to people. Right? When you're happy and you're sitting up listening to Frankie Beverly and Maze, you want to just get out there and be with everybody. You want to help it. That's who we are as axiology, because of where the creator created us. So now we have a situation where years go by where we train them how to eat, how to speak, how to act, quote unquote, civilized. But guess what? They're epigenetically and genetically coded from the ice and to control all the resources. And so at some point they turned. Now, they looked at the divide conquer strategy, which was in them. They had to be very cunning and look at when we were weak and try to pounce on that opportunity. Now, it took thousands of years for them to finally win the war against Africa, if you will. And a lot of people don't know that history. So it's not like, they just wake up one day and say, we're going to take over and that's it. No, dude, it wasn't like that. No, we messed up a lot of Amu, is what we call them. A lot of second frequency people went down over thousands of years. So finally, we got the situation where we're at now, and you've got the King of England saying that we don't want these lubbers. We're looking at the Dark Ages. We're looking at when they perfected torture and why. We're looking at a very sick, psychopathic group of people, right? There's a reason why Game of Thrones is the #1 show in the world for them. Because it is their beginning, it's their history. That is their first frequency, whereas our first frequency was being created by the Creator. Their first story is the Dark Ages. And so they love that. And that's how they treat themselves and each other. That's how they treat us. And it started with their own women that they started doing this on. So we have to look at that. Now, when the king said, hey, I don't want all of these broke, lubbers and all the names and epithets that they call us, I don't want this here. You've got to, you either leave and go into this new world or face death in prison. Well, okay, I'm getting on the boat. I'm coming over here. And because of the white boy on the boat, Columbus started all of this and, said, okay, why don't you, the Pope says, okay, hey, you got all this land here. I'm going to split it up, give this and this to you. Go ahead, do what you want to do. So they come over here, and many people think they killed off most of the Indians by hand. No, they killed off 2 million of the Indians, of Native Americans, I should say, because they were diseased. So that's what caused all of the Native Americans to perish. They and I believe it was syphilis, if I'm not mistaken. But because they were so disgusting, these were filthy, disgusting. They call them lubbers. We now call them white trash. There's a great book by Nancy Eisenberg called White Trash. It's about a 400-page read, but if you're really serious about it, it's worth the read. But this is the concept of where this whole concept of anti-miscegenation came from. So you had the elite whites who were trying to be civilized, acting British, that we taught. And then you have this lower class or no class at all level of whites that, as a result of these anti-miscegenation laws, made them closer to the elite white. Like, oh, I can be like Donald Trump? Okay, now you'll never be a billionaire. You might never be a millionaire or a multimillionaire, but there is some connection and affinity I have, and that is we're both white. And so now I don't have to be, now in order to be white, there has to be an opposite. When white was created, there was a behavior called whiteness that was created. And because white was created, white was given a certain type of privilege. Privilege, the root of that is private law. So it was a private law that now, because I'm white, I have over other people for which others can be denied. But I am white and I am privileged. So now the access to being white is everything. It's everything. And for white men, I have access now to my women. So I get my white woman back. But guess what? I have access to your woman as well. Right? So now we have to look at this level of psychopathy and what's the epigenetic drip that comes from that. So when we look at this concept and begin to unpack it, we see that, all right, now you have, as a black or an African male, I am completely now powerless. I can't defend you. I can't defend my family. In fact, there are rules. I can't look another man in the eye if he happens to be European or white. In fact, I am now reduced to not being a man. I am a boy. And so and then there's a whole litany of things that come with that, but I don't want to filibuster because I know you only got a bit of time, but I just wanted to give you that, and then we can go to the next level.
No, I'm happy that you broke all that down. And family, please make sure you give this video a thumbs up and share. This is important knowledge that's being shared with us today by the Reverend Philippe Shock Matthews. So please show your support by subscribing to the channel. And also, as I said, giving this video a thumbs up. But I like how you talked about the epigenetics regarding people that are now classified as white, because lately I've been seeing a lot of retreats and workshops that are organized by people classified as white. And a lot of these workshops are regarding ancestral trauma. And I always wonder, I've never attended any of these workshops, but I always wonder, how deep does it really go? And are they really addressing the root issue? Or is there like this barrier that prevents them from going there to talk about this deep trauma of, because it hasn't been dealt with, what it has produced, not only in America, but what it's produced globally?
Here's the thing that I came to a conclusion to, and I'll answer your question or your thought process as it relates to this as best I can. And that is, the further back they go, there's no good history. There's no first happy story. The further back they go, the more barbaric they become. The further back they go, they end up disappearing. That's very painful. You know, they have sculpted, scripted, and put this concept in our heads that African people, Black people are a problem, that they're the reason why we're having all of these issues. They're the ones that's racist. We're not racist. And the reason that they do that is because just imagine that they discover, and some of them do, that it wasn't Africans that did this to them. It was the creator. It was nature. Imagine that. Remember, they didn't like God. God was a wrathful God, a hateful God, right? God, that's where all of that religion and crazy crap came from. So imagine that's what you go back to, that the further back you go, even let's take slavery completely out of it. Let's just look at how did God treat you? How did nature treat you? Nobody's ever asked that question. And that is very, very painful. So as Kaba would say, Baba Kaba would say, if I were them, I'd act the same way. Because I understand it. But that's the cause and effect. That's Sankofa going back to come forward. We just know our African history. We don't understand the psychology, the psychopathy, and sociopathy of European history, of how they came to be, but why? Why do they act the way they do? Why is it that and think about it. There's a reason why European white women have an affinity for athletic Black men. Look at the situation in the society. Look at all of your ball players, most of them, not all, but look at your ball players and look at it's the same thing, isn't it? That goes all the way back to when you were an indentured servant or a slave. Somebody owned you, right? There was a billionaire, a millionaire, whatever. Somebody owned you, and you had all of this money. You were, and now look at what's looking at you. It's like, oh my God, I got to get some of that, because Bob don't look like that. Bob just, Bob's all right, but damn, there's something right there that I've never, my goodness, it goes to the knees. Where did that come from? So they're looking at that and they're freaking out. This is where we're at. And there are situations right now where epigenetically Black men or African men are attracted almost unconsciously and even feverishly to European white women. And there's a reason for that. It's called eroticized rage. And it's a fascinating concept. I interviewed Dr. Matthew Knowles, who is Beyonce and Solange's father. And he wrote an incredibly telling autobiography called The Racism Through the Eyes of a Child. And so, me coming in with this metaphysical view, I'm looking at his story, listening to his story, and talking to him. And he's telling me the reason he went through this counseling, and he had to go through a lot of counseling. And at one point, he realized his counseling wasn't culturally specific. He had a white, I think, Jewish counselor. I don't know if she was male or female, but then there were some things that started to come up that the person who was sitting across from him asking him, "How do you feel?" became part of the problem. And so as a result, he got a African-centered psychologist and started having these conversations, and coming to find out he was attracted to white women or light-skinned black women because it was a way of taking back the prize, which was the European, the prize of the European male or the European white male. And it's called eroticized rage. Now, there's still science coming out on this, and we don't know who or what and why, but we have to understand when we do this Sankofa, going back to come forward, cause and effect, there's a reason for everything. And it's not to say you can't love who you love, and you don't have to be Afrocentric and all of that, but there might be an if it's epigenetic, it's not conscious. If it's epigenetic, you're not sitting up saying, "I wonder what my epigenomes are doing right now." You're not having that conversation. You're just acting and thinking, "Oh, I'm so attracted to this light, bright, so much white." There's something going on genetically that, in a sense, that you have to have somebody competent to be able to unpack that as to why so many black men are. And then with the colorism and all the stuff that was done to us to make us hate ourselves and then hate our own women as well, all of that causes that eroticized rage to manifest as such.
That is fascinating. I have not heard of that before. Very fascinating. And so that leads me into the question about now with this creation of whiteness and the change of laws. Obviously, as you had said before, that stripped black men of the ability to be a man, ability to protect, provide. So how did that dynamic then impact the relationship between black men and black women?
Well, at that point in time, white male patriarchy was invented. At the moment anti-miscegenation came down, white supremacy, which is not supreme, but the concept and the impact of that blunt psychological, physiological instrument came into being. White supremacy, white male patriarchy, everything white was at the top. And so whatever, white feminism, whatever that looked like, that was at the top. But the white male patriarchy, because again, white European men owned their wives. They were property. Think about this now. We're going, now it's making sense when we look at that epigenetic drip from the ice. The woman is property. She can't vote. She has no rights. The children are property. Everything the white man owns. I own you. This is my property. I have the right to do whatever I want to do with my property. Okay? So when we, black men, became boys, look at just as the epigenetic drip of what happened to the Amu and the ice, what do you think the epigenetic drip would be of African men being told and made into boys, being bred to breed with their mothers so they could stay in the same stock and loop, or breed with their sisters? They put a blindfold over you, not a blindfold, they put a sack over your head so you can't see who, and the sack over your mother or your sister, whoever is the part of that particular stock, and make you breed with them. and you're a steed. Like you breed dogs, you're a steed. So you have sex and intercourse with hundreds, if not thousands. I don't know. I don't know, but it was at least hundreds of women, some who are in your family, and there was all of this interbreeding, and that's where the term motherfucker comes from, because they would, put your mother. That's where it comes from. So now, what do you think the epigenetic drip would be? Why do you think so many black men have so many babies and don't have any relationship with the mothers? Do you think that's something they consciously do? If it's not conscious, somebody said something. If it's hysterical, it's historical. If it's hysterical, it's historical. So if nothing's wrong with us, what happened? And so we have to look at, what does that do? Now, he's already a boy. Matter of fact, if I can find something here, because I'm working on a PowerPoint. Let me find something I can read to you so you can kind of get an idea. Brother Tommy J. Curry is also a great book called The Man Not. I highly recommend that sisters and brothers pick up that work, because it's some of the best work on the violence perpetrated on Black men and African men, because we have been taught not to give a damn about African men. So in his book, there's a concept of the man-child, where a recapitulation theory claimed that it evolved races through the stages of primitivism as they mature from childhood to adulthood. So the ontology prevented the primitive races from possessing the qualities of the civilized race, which of course was European white people, the European. Within this account, a psychologically mature adult Black male would be thought of as the moral and intellectual equivalent of a white child. Mic drop and pause on that. Mic drop and pause on that. Right. So let me go a little bit further here. In the 19th century, as it relates to the white race, the Negro was feminine. The Negro was feminine. And we know Negro is also what? A false racial construct. We're not Negroes or niggas. We're gods and goddesses having a Negro and nigga experience. Now, Franz Pruner Bay suggested that the Black man is to white man what white woman is to man in general. Carl Voigt or Vogt says the grown-up Negro partakes as regards his intellectual faculties of the nature of the female child and the senile white. That's how they're seeing us and categorizing us, right? He manifests a propensity for pleasure, music, dancing, physical enjoyments, and conversation, while his inconstancy of impressions and of all the feelings are those of a child. Now, what do you think the epigenetic drip and fallout of that would be? Right? So when we look at what white male patriarchy has done to us, nothing's wrong with Black men. Something happened to Black men. Nothing's wrong with Black women. Something happened to Black women. And I'm sorry I keep using the term Black because it's so epigenetically encoded. I just should always say African, because in order to have white, you have to have what? You have to have the opposite, Black. So that is a false racial construct. We're not Black people. We're African people. All of us are different shades of African, and there's no such thing or concept of race. But you don't know that. You know, how many people on the planet know that and even can articulate that in conversation, and context and framework? So when we understand that this concept of the of what happened to Black African men and women What do you think relationship was like? What do you think relationships were like? Now, at one point, coming out of slavery, we wanted to get together and come back together and be one, because that was the African way. At that time, we were closer to Africa than we are now. They saw this and they set up a series of laws known as Jim Crow to create a level of separation and to keep the African man economically oppressed, so he could not become the breadwinner, or that the female, the African female, could become the breadwinner, or at least become more educated, right? And that's happening right now as we speak, right? So most of the brothers who are watching this right now are laborers or blue collar. Most of the sisters are in some type of career and have had perhaps some level of college, if not, full on. Now, what happens when you institute a class issue and divide within a group? Again, divide and conquer strategy. Divide and conquer. We can't allow the African male to reconstitute himself and become the king that he's always been. That he's always been. Not what he would become, what he's always been. We can't allow that to reconstitute itself. So what do we have to do? We have to pit the light skin against the dark skin, the tall against the short, the fat against the skinny. We have to use processes to effeminize, demasculize these men. We have to use the African female against the African male by using class. You don't make enough money. You don't drive a BMW. You ain't got a house. What's your credit score? What's your FICO? What's the, yada, yada, all of these things. And it's partly real. But then also, guess what? That arrested development makes black men, when we get angry, primitive. That's the amygdala that kicks in. Because that arrested development is there due to the oppression and the deliberate act to demean and dehumanize African men and African women. But here, when anti-miscegenation gave access to allowed white men, European men, to have access to all women, women were still allowed to be women. You were still allowed to be a woman, albeit you were raped and concubine and had to participate in orgies with their sons and daughters and children. It was sick, but you were still a woman. We were nothing. We were nothing. We were animals. We were cattle. We nothing. And we were subjected to rape. That was the whole buck breaking thing as well. Our sons, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, were subjected to rape. Think about what that does in that epigenetic drip over time. So now here you are. We're in 2021. And there was a movie that came out in 2001 by the late, great John Singleton called Baby Boy, starring Tyrese, Ving Rhames, and Taraji P. Henson. And if I may, I think I have, because I'm working on this PowerPoint, there was in the opening of the movie, there was a soliloquy that they used from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Now, mind you, Singleton, I think, I don't know, he was in his 20s, but he knew who Dr. Francis Cress Welsing was. Think about that, right? All right, so here's how it was scripted. So and these are rolling, you know how they have the rolling credits in the movie. It said there's this psychiatrist, a lady named Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. She has a theory about the black man in America. She says that because of the system of racism, he's been made to think of himself as a baby, a not yet fully formed being who hasn't realized his full potential. Some of this is striking home to some of the family that's listening right now. To support her claim, she offers the following. First off, what does a black man call his woman? Mama. Second, what does a black man call his closest acquaintances? His boys. And finally, what does a black man call his place of residence? The crib. So you can begin to see the insidious behavior of and this epigenetic drip that was installed in us. This is nothing wrong with us. We're not sick. We're sick from being captured, corralled, and controlled by sick people. Hopefully that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Wonderful job breaking that all down. Because I think even though when we talk about racism, which we have a lot lately, talking about like mainstream media, there's been more of the conversation, but we never really dive into this whole creation of whiteness. And also, where does this whole concept come from? Why was it created? We never really go to the why to understand how we arrived to the point that we are today. So I'm glad that you broke all of that down to help us understand. And also, we're going to talk a little bit more about this on Saturday in the Return of the Kings. We're going to be talking more about what we see this kind of gender war between Black men and Black women, if you will, during the presidential election for 2021. So I think this episode is a great setup for people to understand how we arrived to what we saw during this 2020 presidential election and also moving forward, because it has continued. Especially with Black men, anytime, if Black men were getting yelled at because they were not voting, then they did vote, they got yelled at for who they voted for. It's just been
you're damned if you're in a white system, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Exactly. And so, Reverend Philippe, you talk about the first frequency and us coming to this consciousness. So now us understanding the background to how we arrived to where we are right now, what are some steps that we as a family can take, African men and women can take, individuals to begin that, because it is a process, as you said, it's very layered. We're talking about epigenetics. So this is generation that's of trauma built on top of each other. So it takes time. But it is possible. I think we're proof, right? You and I are proof that if you do the work, you can definitely begin to change.
Facts. Excellent question too, by the way, Kai. Allow me to yield to Dr. Obadiah Shaka's seminal work in his book, The Integration Trap Generation Gap. And there's a section in that book called The Sixfold Stages to Mental Freedom. And so when we talk about this concept of first frequency, we're the firstborn, we're the first idea, we're the first thought of the creator. And when the creator decided to multiply itself and become multiplicable as an entity, it created the African. And so there is a reason why we have survived and in some cases thrived against the greatest assault on humanity that ever happened to humanity. So when we look at our story, and I'm not here to have a pissing contest with any of the Jewish people that are watching and talking about the Holocaust. I'm sorry. It shouldn't even be used in the same sentence. There's no comparison. That's not to take away your trauma and your pain, not to take away the trauma and the pain of the ice and what it did to you. But what you did to your fellow Africans, your fellow humans, was to be non-human. And there's a price to pay for that. We'll talk about that in upcoming shows. But when we look at these sixfold stages, the first three stages is very, very interesting. The first stage is assimilation, where you have to assimilate into this a European culture called America. The blunt instrument that you are received, there's three of them that you receive when you're a child, and it's the white boy on the boat, Columbus, the white boy in the sky, which is God, and the white boy on the stick, which is Jesus. And so if you do not accept that, or even if you do accept that, economically dependent upon class issues because of redlining and where you were born and where you were raised, that the house that you might live in or the house your mother or grandmother might live in might not necessarily be the house and the neighborhood and the zip code that you should be in or could be in, but it was forced upon you and you had no choice to be birthed there. So it's not your fault that you were born into a situation. It's not your fault you are the way that you are. It's your responsibility to wake up and know what happened to you so that you can do something about it. So this assimilation creates what's number two, Black identity. In Black identity, you only get two options. You get to be a good go-along Negro, go to church, believe in the white boy in the stick, believe in the white boy in the sky, get a job or get an education, Europeanized education. Don't try to be an entrepreneur or any of those things, unless you have a little special skills. But we really want you to be a worker. We really want you to be a slave. So we really want you to pay for this education and then go out and come work so that you can hopefully become middle class and be able to pay taxes, because in the Matrix, one of the scenes is the reason why everything is in the Matrix is to create a battery. And that battery represents taxes. And so that's the reason for the entire process, is for us to be able to pay back to them the 1% to keep them in power. Y'all don't know. Y'all didn't know I was Metaphysical Morpheus. Y'all didn't see that coming, did you? Now, anyway, let's move on. So that Black identity now, if I reject because of redlining, because of where I was born, if I didn't have access to education and economics, or my family didn't fight for that because they were going through that red summer, they were fleeing literally the lynching and the mobs and everything from the South, and so they were illiterate. Then you might just end up being now what we call the nigga, or what I call fourth frequency in my framework. So you can either be a good Negro or a nothing ass nigga out here in these streets. That's the Black identity experience for most Black men and Black women. Now, if you're a Black woman, you're the bitch, you're the hoe, the thug, or thought if you're on one side, and then the other side, so we understand what's going on there. So this is why we get into conflicts and fights about what happened to Oprah and Gayle King and all that. They're good Negroes. They assimilated. They're paying a price for it, but there's a price for assimilation. There's a price to be a nigga. So we have to understand that Black identity is very real. Now, the third aspect of the sixfold stages is pre-disturbance. And pre-disturbance is fascinating because pre-disturbance, and there's no right, wrong here. It's just a overall concept that Dr. O put in place, and I hijacked it because I love it and love him so much. But anyway, this pre-disturbance is when something happens to you or to somebody or something you see. Usually, it's what we call vicariously. So that's where a vicarious trauma comes from. We'll see George Floyd. We'll see Trayvon Martin. We'll see Stephon Clark. We'll see Freddie Gray. We'll see Sandra Bland. We'll see Breonna Taylor. Something happens. We're pre-disturbed. This is not right. But what can we do about it? I don't know. Nothing. Okay. So I'm just going to be pre-disturbed because, I got 2 more payments on my Lexus. And I got to take the kids to church on Sunday. I'm about to get a promotion. If I act like a good Negro, if I really good, I'll get my promotion and get my benefits. So I'll be able to retire. You see how that works? So this is that assimilation Black identity. Now that's the pre-disturbance. We look and say, I'll protest, maybe march, maybe, but I'm not going to disturb what I got. But it's the last 3 stages of the sixfold stages where there's a huge metamorphosis. And in between pre-disturbance, after pre-disturbance, there's disturbance. Now you're pissed off. That's the birth of the angry Black woman and the angry Black male. You're disturbed. You can't go back to work the same way you went in the other day after what happened to George Floyd. You can't look at those white people the same way no more. Something happened. You got pissed off. You're disturbed. So now, oh, what's happening with Kai? She's just an angry black Negro. I don't understand. She was so nice and so sweet, and now she's talking about Black Lives Matter, power to the people. What is she doing? You know, so they start all of this, because here's the thing: you can't be fully African in a European society, because that's the fifth stage, or the fourth stage is African identity. You move from disturbance. Now, sometimes you move from disturbance and you just stay there. You don't go into the African. You just pissed. You just an angry brother or sister out here making in these streets, making a living. However you make it a living. You might be on the pole. You might be doing whatever you got to do, but you pissed off as hell about every damn thing, right? Now, if you have accidentally somehow, maybe you're ordained and it's chosen, you might have saw Hidden Colors. However you came into your awakening, you start hearing something. You might hear this bald-headed dude with crooked teeth talking about nothing's wrong with you, something happened to you. And all of a sudden, hey, who is this bald-headed crooked tooth son of a bitch out here talking about, hey, that resonates with me. Now you're having an African experience, an African identity, and you're listening to this for the first time, and it's like, whoa, yeah, that's right. But guess what? African identity is the antithesis of any type of European entity. There is no blending. There is no, it's one of those things. You can't be a little white. You know, like Dr. Robin DiAngelo at the end of her book says she tries to be a little less white each day. And I understood metaphorically what she was saying, but you can't be a little pregnant. You know what I'm saying? You can't be a little white. So it's one or the other. And this is why they look at anything that celebrates and is pro-Black, pro-empowerment as a threat. This is why when you say Black Lives Matter, they have to say, no, all lives matter. Now, this goes back to Dr. Edwin Nichols' work, dichotomous logic. Right? So there has to be a poor, there has to be a rich, there has to be a black, there has to be a white, there has to be a white right, and there has to be a bad black. And this is what this whole thing is. So when you come into that African identity, it's fragile because the sixth stage is revolutionary consciousness. I just watched Judas and the Black Messiah, one of the greatest documentaries, movies done. Everybody needs to see it. Exceptionally painful to watch. Brother Lakeith had to get therapy after playing the role of the brother who betrayed Chairman Fred Hampton, who was played by Daniel Kaluuya, who of course was in Black Panther and Get Out and so on and so forth. Just amazing concept. But these brothers was in their teens, late teens, 19, 20, 21. So woke. They invented the woke. They were living the woke because they were part of the Black Panther Party. When we look at that, that's revolutionary African consciousness. Think about that and think about being in that mindset and being out here with them every single day. I've got Dr. William A. Smith coming back on the program, who did the research and coined the phrase racial battle fatigue. It's literal. It's not hyperbole. It's not conjecture. It's not a concept. Being around white people or Europeans or being in white spaces literally makes us ill psychologically and physiologically. And he has the proof and peer-reviewed research to prove it. So when you go into that sixth stage of African revolutionary consciousness, you become a Kai Torrance. You become a Reverend Philippe Shock Matthews. You become a Baba Kaba, Baba James Smalls, or Leonard Jeffries, all the people that are watching right now and will be watching, because you can't go back. You can't assimilate anymore. Once the mind has been expanded, it can no longer go back to the way it used to think and be, do and behave. So this is where we're at right now as we answer the question, how do we get to first frequency? We are first frequency. There's nowhere to get to. It's what you are. It's you have to unpack the layers of all of this second frequency lies that were told to you that said you're no good and you'll never have anything and be anything. All of that is a lie. You're going to have to at some point, and it's a process, you're going to have to, as Dr. Clark says, as well as Duddy Bookman, you got to let go of the white God. You got to let it go at some point, because if the creator created you and you're made in the image and likeness of the creator, and the creator created the African first, you need to take a selfie and look at yourself on TikTok, and that's God, right? So you are a representation. I'm messing with Kai right now because we had a TikTok tick conversation in the green room. That's a whole nother thing. But anyway, when you take a selfie of yourself, you're looking at God. So you now are having to have a response to your ability to act differently, right? So how would you act as a god or goddess? How would you act as the creator, having a Negro or nigga experience?
Wow. Smash the like button. Subscribe. I don't even know how to follow that. Program over. See you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.
Mic drop, bam. There it is right there. Okay.
And we're done.
Right. And scene.
Exactly. So powerful, so deep. And I want to say, Rev Shock, when you explain that we are First Frequency, when I first launched my business, Kai Marie, and it was in the midst of the pandemic, and I knew I was going to do work around trauma and healing. And, I'm thankful for your work, like I said in the beginning, because you were the one that introduced me to Dr. Joy DeGruy. And I read her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. I read that book like 3 times. I remember one time I was on the train going to work. By the time I got to work, I was so angry because of what I read about what
absolutely. I totally got that.
Yeah. And I didn't know what to do with all this anger. So
that's
I was just
you can't read around white people. If you got to take a white sabbatical when you read that damn book. That's all I'm saying.
Somebody say good morning, you're like, what? What are you, like, you just read a flip out. It's not a good morning. You about to flip out everybody.
Morning. That's right.
And so after reading her book and then finally figuring out what I could do with it, because I was sharing with like friends and family, like, have you read the Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome? Because that was the first time I saw what we experienced. Like, I guess language was put to it. It just wasn't like in a history book. You connected to it on an emotional level and said, wow, so this is a part of why our community looks the way it does.
Put some flesh on them bones. Yes, you did.
It did. And then learning more about the epigenetics. And so when I launched the business, I was like, I want healing, for the content that I provide, anyone can benefit from it. But I said, what I will not do is step away or move away from what my community has experienced in the trauma. I can't kind of gloss it over to make sure that everybody feels comfortable at the expense of my community. Because I did that for so long in my career. Because you had to assimilate. So I'm like, now that I'm launching out on my own, I can. And now that I've been exposed to so many more thought leaders and scholars and people in academia, it's like, no, we have to do this work. And it would be a disservice for me to get all that information, to meet people such as yourself and others, to have this information and then not share with our community because I'm afraid of white people getting scared or nervous or, I can't do that. And it almost feels as though when you had made that point that you have to make that decision.
It is. You're absolutely right. And I'm so honored to be able to have a conversation with someone about this because I too struggled. I said, oh, damn, if I once I open that door, I cannot go back and then it was an issue of morality, right? It was a moral and ethical situation. I'm like, oh shit, I can't lie to people no more. Not before when I was lying to them, I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to make everybody happy. Let's all come together. Namaste, namaste, kumbaya, my Lord, la 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 la, shaka blah blah, Shaka Khan. I was trying to make everybody happy, and so, I ain't got no sense. So I was going around and I was making out, hi, happy, hey, happy white person, how you doing? Hey, Becky, hey, Bob, hey, everybody. And then I started getting the truth. I started unpacking the history, and I said, "Oh," and I went through stages I went through emotional stages where I went through depression. I went through anger. I went through rage. I went through moments of just completely collapsing and sobbing. I went through, there was a honeymoon stage. Dr. Shaka talks about this. There was a honeymoon stage when anything and everything African is great, which we know is not true because we're human. But I went through all of these emotions. And then when I decided to become a minister, I said one of the main reasons I decided to do that is because I had an obligation. And I said, this story that I have lived for 50 some odd years at the time happened for me to be able to tell. My life is the perfect story for me to be able to tell and share this information. It was like at that moment, everything that I went through made sense. Everything. It all made sense. I was like, oh, and that was a moment I had, I still get emotional thinking about it. But I could not go back and I could not create a ministry whereby Europeans felt safe and comfortable. And I'm not doing it because I hate white people. We don't hate. Once you go into that revolutionary consciousness and that sixfold stage, you're at a peace of mind that's unbelievable because you know the truth. And when you know the truth, you have power, you have agency, you have self-efficacy. So, but they can't see that. They just think, Philippe is angry, hates white people. He's always hated white, but not the case. I just now know more about white people, you, than you know about yourself. I know your history. I know your genetic makeup. I know your genetic propensities. I know your proclivities, all of that. And that's scary when somebody walks in a room and can read you and know you before you even open your mouth or reach out to shake their hand. Whether you black or white, that don't matter. But anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right, Kai. You can't go back, and it is a conversation that you have to have with yourself. Most of us, it's an economic issue then, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, all right, I can't be messing with white people. Where am I going to work? How am I going to eat? Then there's the spiritual issue. Well, what about Jesus? You mean all this scripture? What about all this scripture? Now, I know me some Jesus. I know Jesus got me through this. Well, what? Serapis? Who the hell is Serapis? What? You the Coptic Egyptians just, huh? He never, no, but he's white. No, he's not white. Well, he's got to be black. No, he's not. He never walked. No. Oh, snap. That can cause you to go bat-ish crazy, right? So it's a layered effect, and all of us are not going to wake up equally, let alone simultaneously. However, Kai, we're at a critical mass right now. We need soldiers in consciousness. This is a conscious celestial war and game, not terrestrial. We fought the terrestrial and won. This is celestial. We've got to be one in frequency, which is what frequency specificity means.
Wow, another mic drop right here on the Healing Element podcast with Rev Philippe Shock.
I'm gonna come on here every day. Y'all make me feel so damn good. What you doing tomorrow, my sister? I'm saying, for real.
It's so true. And again, I'm happy that we're having this conversation too. And I wonder how many other African business owners, and I'm going to say Black business owners, have that same type of maybe dilemma or decision when they're coming into that consciousness and say, I want to do this healing, trauma healing work, but I'm also worried about how is this going to affect my bank account. That would be definitely an interesting dialogue. Especially as you're coming into that consciousness, maybe while you're opening your business, because we're always evolving and coming into new information.
Well, I had to figure it out because I wasn't going to be able to eat.
Right.
I had to figure it out, and so the internet and digital marketing was my way out. And for a while, I had white clients. I paid a dear price of racial battle fatigue working with them. Every single one of them betrayed me. and harmed me emotionally, psychologically. But that's what you got to do. That's part of the job. So I had to make a decision to say, okay, I remember having the conversation with my goddess, baby, I can't do it anymore. I can't. This is the last white person that I will work for. This is it. I'm done. I'm going to work with my community exclusively. I have figured this thing out. I know how to make anybody and everybody money. It's a learning curve based upon their trauma or based upon their economic situation, but I can't go back. I am not working with them. I'm not working through nothing. So now that level of freedom, it was like, you remember that scene in Ray when Ray was coming off of heroin in the bed? That's how I was. I was like, you know what? This is just something else. I tell you what, let make it do what it do, baby. I mean, I was out there, dude. It was like I was going through this white addiction thing. Like, what is going on? And then I started to have clarity and I felt free. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This must be what revolutionary consciousness feels like. But you are going to go through an identity crisis on multiple levels, multiple times throughout your exercising of whiteness out of your system, because it's in our blood. It's in our blood, fam. And we got to get it out. We got to purify ourselves. And you know, I'm starting to sound like Prince in Lake Minnetonka. We got to pure ourselves from this Amu, because it's so deep that we don't even know how. I had to find out and figure out, why did I hate myself? When did I become a nigga? Right? Because I used to be the dude. What's up, my nigga? How you doing? I was that guy. And somebody would say, hey, my nigga, how you doing? And I would turn around like, hey, my nigga, what's going on? Whoa, what am I doing? What am I doing? How could anybody respect you when you use and identify, not just use, but identify as that which they labeled you? Give me a break. So it's a lot of layers, brothers and sisters, to be able to move yourself into this first frequency. But guess what? We're the only people who can. They can't access first frequency. So we are first frequency. So that's one of the beauties. You know, they steal everything and appropriate everything else, but they can just talk about it. But we are all about it in a real sense.
Wonderful. Thank you again. And again, if you've been joining us, if you just now joined the conversation, make sure you watch the playback, because there's a lot of truth bombs being dropped by Rev Shock. So you want to definitely check that out. Please make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, share it. This is important information that the family needs to know. Rev Shock, we have went over, but I was enjoying it. So
no, really?
I hope I didn't. Hope I didn't disrupt your plan.
How would I have ever known?
So for those that are listening, especially when we were talking about the small business, because
as you know, a lot of Black... Tell us more. Lady, I've been on here an hour and 20 minutes. What do you want from me?
You know what that means, Rev Shock? We just got to have you back. We got to be back on the platform.
What do you want?
So when you know, like, a lot of Black businesses, a lot of Black businesses have suffered during this time. So for those, any Black businesses, if you have a small Black business, a small business, Rev Shock, you have some books that could be helpful to them, right? Could you share with us, so that way, and I'll also make sure that I put a link in the description box.
Yeah, well, of course, Digitaronomics, right? Digitaronomics you can get on Amazon. There is another book called on Amazon called 50 plus reasons why African Americans successfully fail at economics. And so what we have to understand, the brain, the African brain, was designed to succeed at all cost. It took the Amu decades upon decades and centuries to figure out how to use the African brain of success against itself. So we as African people are either succeeding or we're succeeding at failing. So we're succeeding at success or we're succeeding at failure, but we're looping. We're not learning. We're looping. And so that is part of the process that I teach.
Beautiful. So please, if you're listening right now or in the playback, make sure you go to Amazon to make those purchases. Highly recommend for your business and also for your own personal growth and development. Reverend Philippe Shock, thank you so much for joining me on the Healing Element podcast. For those that are listening, watching, how can they learn more about you and your work?
You can just type in Metaphysical Morpheus in the Google, or Philippe Matthews in Google or Amazon, Rev Shock in Google or Amazon. And you can also go to firstfrequency.com. That's the number 1 stfrequency.com. I have a free infinity and affinity e-course that can walk you through everything first frequency and knowing who you are. Thank you, Sandra. I see you out there. I see Shakoya and Sophia. Thank y'all. Love y'all. Y'all come back now. Y'all here?
I love it. Thanks so much. And also on Spotify, right? People can find.
Oh yeah, I have an entire 7-part series on Spotify, iTunes, all the streaming platforms, Napster, iHeart, wherever music is streamed. Go into your iTunes, go into your Spotify, type in Metaphysical Morpheus. Pow! I come right up there, and I'll be with you on your way to work. You know, and that's where you need me, right there. Right before you have to go into those white people, that's when you need to punch me in, right then before you got to go in there and have a conversation with them. So, yeah, I got you. Thank you for the reminder of that too, Guy.
Oh, of course. And next, we're going to have your TikTok account will be up and running soon.
You know, let me tell you. Okay, let's tell the story now. We got to tell the family the story. We're in the green room, and I'm looking at this sister. I woke up this morning, I turned on all my social media, and Kai was everywhere. I thought she was God, because there's no spot where Kai was not. I said, wait a minute, what's going on? Is this sister stalking me? What is the algorithmic response to this, you know? So she's on TikTok. She's got a morning meditation, yoga meditation. Then she was in the afternoon eating something. And then she had something else she was doing in the evening, doing some kind of stretch pose or something. I'm like, how do you even have time to do all of this? I mean, she's on TikTok. She's talking her tick out there on the talk. She's on Instagram, getting her grams on. She's on Facebook. She's on Eventbrite, Everbright, all the lights and everything. I'm like, sister, what are you doing? How can I be down? That's all I'm saying. How can I be a part of that? Because you are doing your thing. There is no spot where Kai is not. I'm so proud of you for what you're doing, because that's what you have to do, and that's what it's about, getting the message out, being consistent with content, and having a good time doing it. You know what I mean? That's why I don't give people a hard time when I come on shows and stuff, because it's heavy. The work that we do is heavy lifting, heavy psychological lifting. You know, like, who ministers to the ministers after we get done doing what we got to do for the community, you know? So we got to have fun with it. And so I was messing with Kai in the green room, because when we talk about omnipotent, Kai is omnipotent. All right. That's what Shock stands for, seeking higher omnipotent conscious. I need to change it and put an extra K in that for Kai is what I need to do.
You heard it here first.
So what is that? Shakaka. So it'd be Shakaka, you know, so it'd be an extra K. Y'all know I ain't got no sense. Look at the racial battle fatigue, what it did to me. I used to look good. I was fine as hell one time.
It's hard work. It's hard work being in this space of trauma, especially talking about racial trauma and doing the research and preparing for presentations, because you're reading that stuff over and over again. So I really appreciate that we can have a heavy topic here today, but also bring some laughter in it, because it's important to balance that out. Because you can end up going into a deep depression if you are just kind of in this stuff heavy and not taking that break.
Absolutely. So there's some scotch in the stick. I'll wait for a brother after this show right there. That's all.
So we'll wrap up right now so the Rev can get to his scotch.
Rev got priorities up in here, you know. He's got his wife over there, got one of the little scotch and sofa. You know what I'm saying?
I knew this would happen. I'm trying to pull myself together, and then I start laughing, and I bring it.
Oh, you can stand seen.
But thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I know that you learned a lot. Again, please share this information with friends and with family. This is some deep healing insight that the Rev Shock has graced us with tonight. So please make sure you share that, and also subscribe to the Healing Element podcast. And also please go to Amazon and check out his books, and also firstfrequency.com. Make sure you go to his website as well. Again, thank you so much, Rev Shock, for coming on the platform, and love to have you back anytime.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it, Goddess. Give love to the King, too. King Dwayne. Hotep King.
Will do. Thank you. Thank you all. You guys have a great night. Also, I will be here again tomorrow. Don't laugh at me, Reverend Shock.
You saw it. Thank you for that. Thank you. Yes.
I'll be here tomorrow.
I know you will.
For another great interview. We're going to be talking about the history of policing in America and its impact on the Black community with Thurston. He was actually on the program before, and he's going to be back on again. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And with that, have a great night, guys. Bye-bye.